The first stock you need to have on your radar right now is Equinix. Imagine it's 3 a.m. in a skyscraper in downtown Manhattan. In a dark room on the 40th floor, an executive team is staring at a screen. They've spent the last 6 months building a private agentic AI, a digital workforce designed to handle everything from their global supply chain to real-time customer negotiations. They hit execute, but the system lags. The latency is too high. The cooling fans in their on-site server room are screaming at a pitch that sounds like a jet engine taking off. Why? Because you cannot run the intelligence age on the information age. This is the central bottleneck of 2026. Every major corporation is realizing that while they can lease GPUs from the cloud, they cannot keep their most sensitive proprietary models there forever. They need their own private AI clusters. But there's a problem. Your average office building or standard data center wasn't built to handle the heat of 1,000 suns. This is where Equinix steps in. On paper, they look like a standard real estate investment trust. To the uninitiated, they just own big, gray buildings. But in reality, they are the literal landlords of the intelligence age. We have officially moved past the experimental phase of AI. In 2024, people were playing with chatbots. In 2026, companies are deploying autonomous agents that make millions of decisions per second. These models require an insane amount of localized physical hardware. Specifically, high-density GPU racks that pull 4 to 5 times the power of a traditional server. Equinix doesn't just provide floor space, they provide the interconnection. If you are a bank in London and you need your AI to talk to your payment processor in New York with zero lag, you don't send that data over the public internet. You use Equinix's private fabric. It is a closed-loop digital highway that bypasses the traffic of the web. As the world shifts toward decentralized data centers to handle the immense power load of 2026, Equinix is the only player with a global footprint large enough to make these AI agents run without a millisecond of stutter. But here is the explode now catalyst that most retail investors are missing: the great retrofit. Over the last 18 months, while the market was obsessively chasing chip manufacturers, Equinix was quietly spending billions retrofitting its facilities for high-density liquid cooling. Traditional air cooling is dead. You cannot blow enough cold air on a 2026 grade AI cluster to keep it from melting. Equinix saw this coming. They've integrated direct-to-chip liquid cooling across their major global hubs, from Ashburn to Cyberjaya. They've become an essential utility in the truest sense. If a Fortune 500 company wants to run a private AI cluster, they have a choice. They can spend 3 years and $500 million building their own specialized facility, or they can sign a 10-year lease with Equinix tomorrow. Their earnings are finally starting to reflect what I call AI-driven rent escalations. Because the supply of liquid-cooled, high-power density space is so low, Equinix now has unprecedented pricing power. They aren't just raising rents by 3% or 4%. They are seeing massive premiums from desperate corporations who need to house their private AI clusters immediately or risk falling behind. The market has priced Equinix like a real estate company. It hasn't yet priced them like the high-margin, mission-critical AI utility they've become. When the next round of earnings reports confirms that their interconnection revenue is scaling alongside the global AI rollout, the valuation won't just tick up, it will re-rate entirely. There is literally no other physical location for the world's private intelligence to live. Equinix owns the land, the power, and the cooling. In 2026, that makes them the most important landlord on the planet. To really understand the depth of this opportunity, you have to look at the physics of the problem. We often talk about AI as if it's this ethereal, ghostly thing living in the cloud. But AI is actually very heavy. It is made of silicon, copper, and staggering amounts of electricity. Think about the transition from the horse and carriage to the internal combustion engine. People focused on the cars, but the real wealth was built by those who understood that these cars needed a massive network of paved roads and standardized gas stations to be useful. Equinix is the highway and the gas station combined. When a company like a major global logistics firm decides to automate its entire fleet using AI, it creates a massive data gravity problem. They can't just send all that data to a central cloud server thousands of miles away. The speed of light simply isn't fast enough. They need to process that data at the edge, right where the physical action is happening. Equinix has spent decades placing their data centers at the exact points where the world's subsea fiber optic cables meet the land. They are the crossroads of the internet. By being at these crossroads, they allow companies to put their AI brains right next to the data they are processing. This isn't just a convenience, it is a physical necessity for the next generation of automation. The narrative in 2026 has shifted from who has the best model to who has the most reliable uptime. If a company's agentic AI goes offline for even 10 minutes, they aren't just losing a few website clicks, they are losing their entire operational capacity. This shift creates a level of customer stickiness that is almost unheard of in the business world. Once a company moves its proprietary hardware into an Equinix facility and connects it to the global fabric, the cost and risk of moving it somewhere else are astronomical. You aren't just renting a room, you are integrating into a global nervous system. This creates a moat that is reinforced by the sheer difficulty of building new data centers in 2026. Zoning laws, power grid constraints, and environmental regulations mean that it is almost impossible to build a competing facility in a major city today. Equinix already owns the ground, they already have the power permits, and they already have the cooling technology. If you look at the financials with a deeper lens, you see a transition from a capital-heavy business to a margin expansion business. In the past, they had to spend a lot of money to buy land and build shells. Now, the shells are built, and they are simply filling them with much more profitable equipment. A single square foot in an Equinix center today generates significantly more revenue than it did 5 years ago, because the equipment inside is so much more valuable, and the services required to maintain it are so much more complex. This is the classic operating leverage play that drives stock prices into the stratosphere. When your costs stay relatively stable, but your revenue per unit of space explodes because of a technological shift, the profit falls straight to the bottom line. Think about the psychological shift happening in boardrooms right now. For years, the mantra was cloud first. But as AI becomes the core competitive advantage for every industry, keeping that advantage on someone else's server feels like a massive risk. We are seeing a historic swing back toward hybrid infrastructure. Companies keeping their generic data in the cloud, but pulling their intelligence into private, physically secure locations that they control. Equinix is the beneficiary of this great re-centralization. They provide the security of a private vault with the connectivity of the open web. As we move deeper into 2026, keep your eyes on the power consumption numbers. The world is hungry for electricity, and data centers are the biggest diners at the table. Equinix has been a leader in securing green energy contracts and building high-efficiency systems that use a fraction of the power of older centers. In a world where carbon taxes and energy quotas are becoming the norm, being the most efficient player isn't just good for the planet, it's a massive competitive advantage. Companies will flock to Equinix because it might be the only place they are legally allowed to run such massive power-hungry clusters. The story of Equinix in 2026 is the story of the physical reality of the digital world. It's a story of cooling, power, and connectivity. While everyone else is gambling on which AI model will win the popularity contest, you should be looking at who owns the stage they all have to perform on. Equinix is that stage. It is a deep, structural play on the most significant technological shift of our lifetimes. And because it wears the boring mask of a real estate company, the window to get in before the massive re-rating is still open. But as the 3 a.m. executive teams keep hitting that lag wall, they are going to keep signing those leases, and the market won't be able to ignore the numbers for much longer. Focus on the physical constraints, follow the power, and you'll see why this is the stock that is truly positioned to lead the next leg of this cycle. Moving into the physical world, the second name is Paradigm. Picture a small machine shop in America's industrial heartland, maybe just outside of Columbus, Ohio. The owner, a guy named Mike who took over the business from his father, is standing on the floor at 6 a.m. For 3 years, Mike has had 4 CNC machines sitting idle because he simply cannot find the specialized labor to run them. The help wanted sign in the window is faded from the sun, and the few applicants who do show up have zero experience with the precision required for modern aerospace parts. This isn't just Mike's problem. It's the quiet crisis of the American economy in 2026. The world is trying to reshore manufacturing, bringing it back from overseas, but there aren't enough hands to do the work. If you've been paying attention to these labor shortages and the massive reshoring movement of the last year, you know that robotics is no longer a luxury. It's a survival requirement for manufacturing. Mike doesn't need a massive million-dollar cage-bound robot like the ones used to weld truck frames in Detroit. He needs something that can stand next to him, learn a task in minutes, and not break a worker's ribs if they bump into it. This is where Teradyne enters the story. Teradyne owns Universal Robots, the global leader in cobots, which are collaborative robots designed to work safely alongside humans. For a long time, the bear case against Teradyne was that cobots were neat but limited. They were great for simple tasks like picking up a box and putting it on a pallet, but they struggled with anything complex. They were fast, but essentially blind and rigid. The reason Teradyne is about to explode right now, in mid-2026, is that their new generation of AI-integrated cobots has finally solved the vision and adaptability problem. In the past, if a part on Mike's assembly line was off by just 2 millimeters, the robot would crash or error out. You had to program every single micro movement into a teach pendant, which took hours of expert coding. It was a headache that most small business owners avoided. Now, thanks to the edge computing breakthroughs we've seen throughout 2026, these units have developed what we call spatial intelligence. Teradyne's latest models use onboard neural processing units that allow the robot to see and feel its environment in 3 dimensions. If Mike drops a tray of bolts and they scatter across the table, the robot doesn't stop. It looks at the mess, identifies the bolts, adjusts its grip in real time, and keeps working. It's the difference between a machine that follows a script and a machine that understands a task. We're seeing a massive wave of small to medium businesses, the Mikes of the world, not just the automotive giants, buying these by the dozens to stay competitive. Because these robots can now adapt to messy, unpredictable factory floors in real time without custom programming for every single movement, the time to value has dropped from months to days. You unbox the robot, show it the task once by moving its arm manually, and the AI handles the optimization. Teradyne is sitting at the perfect intersection of proven hardware and cutting-edge software. But there's a deeper financial story here that the casual observer is missing. Historically, Teradyne was a cyclical hardware company. They sold a robot, booked the profit, and moved on. That is a tough way to build a massive valuation, because you're always starting from zero every quarter. But in 2026, their margins are shifting. They are moving toward a software-as-a-service model for their robot operating systems. When Mike buys a cobot today, he isn't just buying a mechanical arm. He's subscribing to a platform. He pays a monthly fee for the vision intelligence updates, the safety protocol patches, and the cloud-based analytics that tell him exactly how to make his floor more efficient. This turns a one-time hardware sale into a decade of high-margin, recurring revenue. Think about what that does to a company's stock. It moves it from a manufacturing multiple to a software multiple. When the market realizes that Teradyne is effectively the Microsoft Windows of the factory floor, the valuation is going to undergo a violent correction to the upside. The American manufacturing story of 2026 isn't about bringing back millions of low-skill manual labor jobs. Those days are gone. It's about high-tech reshoring. It's about one skilled technician overseeing a fleet of 10 AI-driven cobots. Teradyne is the one providing the nervous system for that entire transition. They've spent years building the mechanical reliability, and now they've layered the brain on top of it at the exact moment when the world has no other choice but to automate. Look at the macro environment. Trade tensions and supply chain fragility have made local production a national security priority. Governments are subsidizing the automation of the homeland. Teradyne is the primary beneficiary of this trend because they have the highest ease of use score in the industry. A factory manager in South Carolina or a textile owner in Georgia doesn't have time to hire a team of robotics engineers. They need a tool that works out of the box. If you want to understand why the explosion is happening now, look at the replacement cycle. The first generation of cobots from 10 years ago is reaching end of life. Companies are now upgrading to the AI-integrated versions. This isn't just new growth, it's a massive refresh cycle of the existing installed base. Every old, dumb robot is being replaced by a smart Teradyne unit that can do 3 times the work with half the power. The educational takeaway here is to stop thinking of robotics as a futuristic concept. In 2026, it is a commodity of necessity. When a commodity becomes smart, it becomes an infrastructure play. Teradyne is the infrastructure of the new American factory. They own the most valuable real estate in the world, the 2 feet of space right next to a human worker. As Mike looks at his shop floor, he doesn't see 4 idle machines anymore. He sees 4 robots working silently through the night, lit only by the green status LEDs on their base. He's producing more parts with fewer errors than his father ever thought possible. That's the productivity miracle of 2026. Teradyne is the engine of that miracle. While the hype is focused on digital bots on our screens, the real tangible wealth is being created by the bots that are actually building the world. This is a deep, structural shift in how things are made, and Teradyne is holding the keys to the factory. Follow the labor data. Watch the capital expenditure reports of mid-sized manufacturers, and you'll see the footprint of an explosion that is already underway. The third stock is the leader of the bio-AI explosion, Recursion Pharmaceuticals. Imagine a young woman named Sarah living in a small town in Pennsylvania. For years, Sarah has lived with a ticking time bomb in her gut, a rare genetic condition called familial adenomatous polyposis, or FAP. It's a disease that forces thousands of tiny polyps to grow in the colon, almost guaranteeing cancer by middle age. In the old world of medicine, Sarah's only real treatment was a brutal, life-altering surgery to remove her entire colon. There were no pills, no targeted therapies, just the surgeon's knife and a prayer. The pharmaceutical industry had largely ignored her because her disease was too rare, too complex, and too expensive to solve using traditional guess-and-check chemistry. But as we sit here in May 2026, Sarah's story is taking a different turn. She is part of a clinical trial for a drug called REC 4881. This drug wasn't found by a scientist having a eureka moment in a lab. It was discovered by a supercomputer in Salt Lake City that scanned millions of cellular images to find a hidden biological pattern that no human eye could ever see. For years, the promise was that AI would revolutionize drug discovery, but it took until this year to see the clinical proof that justifies a massive valuation. Recursion isn't a traditional biotech firm relying on a single moonshot drug. They are an industrial-scale data company that happens to do biology. They possess one of the largest proprietary biological datasets in existence, over 50 petabytes of cellular images and genetic data, and their map of biology is now being licensed by almost every major pharma giant, from Roche to Sanofi. Think about the traditional drug discovery process like trying to find a specific house in a city without a map, in the middle of a blackout, while only being allowed to knock on one door every 6 months. That is why 90% of drugs fail. It's a multi-billion-dollar game of blindfolded darts. Recursion turned the lights on. They built a search engine for biology. Instead of testing one hypothesis at a time, they run millions of wet lab experiments every week using massive robotic arms. Every time an experiment finishes, the data is fed back into their AI, making the map more accurate. The reason they are the Explode Now candidate is their current pipeline and the specific results hitting the wires this month. Just a few days ago, Recursion released updated clinical data for that drug REC 4881. The results were staggering. A 53% median reduction in polyp burden for patients like Sarah. That isn't just a statistical improvement, that is a clinical miracle. For the first time, we have definitive proof that a drug designed by an AI operating system actually works in the human body. But here is where it gets deeper for the investor. Recursion has several more key readouts coming in the next few months across rare diseases and oncology, targets that were discovered and optimized entirely by their Recursion OS. In the old world, a drug took 10 years and billions of dollars just to fail in phase 2. Recursion is doing it in a fraction of that time with a much higher hit rate. They aren't just making drugs, they are making the factory that makes drugs. If you are looking at the charts, you have to understand the platform validation effect. In the biotech world, if a company has one drug that works, the stock goes up. But when a company proves their system works, the entire valuation re-rates. It's the difference between owning a single car and owning the company that invented the assembly line. If even one of these AI-designed drugs gets the final green light from the FDA this year, it validates the entire multi-billion-dollar platform. The stock won't just move, it will revalue overnight as the new industry standard for how modern medicine is engineered. Imagine the shift in the American healthcare landscape. We are moving away from blockbuster drugs that work for some people but have toxic side effects for others, and moving toward precision engineering. Recursion's AI can predict toxicities before a human ever swallows a pill. They recently reported that their LSD-1 inhibitor for small cell lung cancer showed almost dose-limiting toxicities in early trials, a feat that has defeated almost every other pharma company trying to hit that same target. The bio-AI explosion of 2026 is the moment biology finally became a predictable engineering discipline. We are seeing major institutional players, the big smart money funds, quietly building massive positions because they see the infrastructure play. They know that even if a major pharma giant like Roche wants to compete, they have to pay a toll to Recursion to use their data maps. It's a toll booth model for the most valuable commodity on Earth, human health. The hook for you as an investor is the data moat. Every week that passes, Recursion runs millions more experiments. Every experiment makes their AI smarter. Every smart AI makes the next drug discovery faster. This is a flywheel effect that is almost impossible for a newcomer to catch up to. You can't just buy 50 petabytes of biological history. You have to earn it through years of automated lab work. As we move through the rest of 2026, stop looking for the next lucky biotech stock. Start looking for the infrastructure that removes the need for luck. Recursion is that infrastructure. They are the software layer of the human body. With a cash runway that stretches into 2028 and partnerships that are already generating millions in milestone payments, they have the staying power that most small biotechs lack. Watch the institutional entries on the 13F filings. Look for the go/no-go decisions on their oncology programs later this year. When Sarah walks into that Pennsylvania clinic and hears that her polyps are shrinking without surgery, that's a win for humanity. When you see that result reflected in a platform that can repeat that success 1,000 times over, that's the trade of a decade. Focus on these infrastructure plays, watch the institutional entries, and execute the trade. The era of guessing in medicine is over. The era of engineering has begun. If you want more videos like this on stocks, subscribe now. I break down real opportunities, not hype.
The content provided in this video is for educational purposes only. It should not be considered as financial advice or a recommendation to buy or sell any securities. The information presented is based on our research and analysis and is intended to help viewers understand stock market concepts and strategies.